turnout here already so far. Folks will probably continue to come in. Welcome, everybody. My name is Pastor Ed Treat. I'm the founder and CEO of the Center of Addiction and Faith. And we're here today to do a webinar on how to start and sustain a recovery ministry at your church. And I've got two really great guests with me today. John Sutherland, who's doing work out in Wisconsin, and Drew Brooks, who's been doing this work for many, many years, 20 plus, and continues to do great work. And he's going to tell us how to do this. And I'm going to kind of give a case for why to do it. But just so you know, the Center of Addiction and Faith is committed to awakening faith communities to address the issues of addiction. And the feeling is that faith communities aren't doing enough, and the problem is growing worse, and we need faith communities to step up and help. There's a lot of suffering going on out there, and people look to the church often for help and many times walk away disappointed, unfortunately. And so we want to change that. We think faith communities are well positioned to do some good work. So thanks for being here and being a part of this conversation. I think it's vital. And it can change the world, I think, if we can get faith communities engaged. Let me begin with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. The Lord be with you. Gracious, loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather in this miraculous way from across the country. I thank you for all who are here today. We lift before you all those who suffer from addiction in whatever form it takes, and it takes many forms. And for those who love those addicted, who suffer along with them, so much suffering spread around. We pray for healing to happen. We pray for solutions. I pray for our church that it could be a place to be involved with helping those who suffer. Guide us, direct us, be with us. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about let's see. I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is an important matter. I got into this.
Let me stop. Is this a real job or is this a contract?
All right. Katie, do you know how to mute folks?
Okay.
If you're not muted, please mute yourself. I don't know if there's a blank.
It's coming from James.
How did you know that, Otto?
I was just going to say, I can ask everyone to mute everyone, and then unmute you guys.
All right. Thanks, Katie.
Sure.
All right. So there's a lot of interest in this topic. We had like 100 people sign up. We've got 42 present already, and they continue to come in. So apparently a lot of interest in this topic. So I'm really, really glad you're here. If you would take a second and just click on the chat page and say your name and where you're from, the state and maybe the city where you're from. It would be fun to see where everybody's gathering from here today. So I got into the ministry in 1995, and I was already in recovery for many years at that point. So I was in recovery and then got into the ministry. And I got into the ministry because, I'd kind of given up on the church. It was a Lutheran church retreat, and they were doing a weekend workshop on the 12 steps. And I thought, wow, how cool is this? Finally, a church that's talking about recovery. And so I was really excited, and I thought, these Lutherans, they're okay. I didn't know anything about Lutherans. So I got involved there. I became a volunteer at Holden Village. And it was there I decided to go into the ministry because I thought I could live out my 12-step recovery in a church. And so I got to seminary and became ordained and went into the church. And what I discovered was that the church really is not interested in this topic. I tried to raise it in a variety of settings, and it just was little to no interest. And that kind of surprised me and disappointed me. And I went through a lot of anxiety around it. And I then decided that I was going to separate my life. I would have church over here and I would have my recovery meetings over here. And I would just have to live with these two separate lives, and the church just wouldn't talk about recovery. And I went along fine like that. I joined a group called the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy, and we have worked over the years to try to raise awareness. And I can tell you it's been challenging. Again, the church doesn't want to talk about this. We would get interest once in a while, but then we would be quickly forgotten. I don't know what it is about this topic, but the world doesn't want to pay attention to it. Well, in 2016, I heard Amy Klobuchar speak at a gathering in Minnesota about the opioid crisis. And she said, this is getting out of control. People are dying. Everything we're doing is not working. We need some solutions. And I had a vision then that I just saw in my head that there's a church on nearly every street corner in every town in this country. And I thought, what if churches began to do something? I mean, I'm not saying that they would solve the problem or be the whole solution, but what if they played a part? What if they, put a brochure in their narthex? What if they put information in their website and their bulletin? What if they just started doing little things like that, so that when people wander in looking for help, they would at least be able to go away with something rather than nothing. And so I decided that maybe this was the time to start getting the church involved. And so the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy put on a conference in Minneapolis, and we decided we would educate faith leaders to better understand addiction and better respond to it. And we weren't sure if anyone would show up, but we ended up with pastors and lay leaders from 34 different states, 17 different denominations showed up, and we had a cutoff registration at 200. And we were really blown away by that and realized that there's some real interest in this. And people are ready to talk about it. And so this is what launched the Center of Addiction and Faith. And our mission is to make a case for why churches should do this. We don't really provide the answer to that question. We just provide the challenge, the prophetic voice of saying, this is a problem. What are you doing about it? Why aren't you doing anything about it? And why, people are dying. Why isn't the church concerned? There's some statistics. 107,000 young people have died in the last year from accidental overdose. These weren't people who were trying to kill themselves. They didn't want to die. They were either trying to alleviate pain or they were trying to have some fun. And now they're gone. And they leave behind grieving families. They leave behind communities that are devastated. Since 1999, it's been over 1 million people. In the last 23 years, 1 million people have died from accidental overdose. Since the COVID pandemic has started in the last 4 years, teen drug use is up 61%. That's a lot. Over half Americans increased alcohol consumption during the pandemic, and they continue to overconsume. So the number for those who die just from alcohol is about 140,000 a year. Women now are the fastest growing sector with substance abuse disorder issues. So women are starting to do too much. According to SAMHSA, in 2020, 40.3 million people 12 or older have a substance abuse disorder, and that number since 2020 continues to go up. But here at the Center of Addiction and Faith, we always want to say it's more than just substance abuse. Addiction has to do with a whole lot more, like process addictions, gambling, shopping addiction, overworking addiction. Did you know that 25 to 30% of women who are professionals suffer from overwork? And it's because the expectations are that they work harder to do the same as their counterparts. And so they become work addicted. There's food addiction. We have an incredible food overeating problem in this country. There's exercise addiction. There's social media addiction. There's codependency. There's a long list. And so this is a huge societal problem. And there's a lot of really good science out there. And I can tell you that pastors are not trained over this in seminary. Pastors get very little training about addiction. And so you have spiritual leaders out there who don't understand this pervasive problem in our culture, to understand the process of addiction and how it works in the human body. and in the human soul. And I don't know how you can be a spiritual leader if you don't have that basic understanding. We have doctors who get very little training on this. And so when people end up in emergency rooms, they're being treated as drug seekers rather than broken people who have a health issue. And so they're not being treated. The collateral damage from addiction extends to every one of us. You may not struggle with addiction yourself or think you don't. I think everyone does to some degree, but you are impacted by it. Every person with addiction is negatively impacted 6 other people. And so if you have it in your family, it's impacted you in ways you probably don't even know. It's if you work with someone with a problem, if you have a friend or family members, they're impacting your life. The impacts include stress on everyone, family relationships, destabilization of the home environment, disruption of family, the muddling of relationships, compromised finances, mental, emotional, physical health. So lots of issues come out of this one problem. And the better we understand it, the better we can respond to it. And so that's why I've invited Drew Brooks to talk about. So I'm just making a case for why we should do this. And then when churches and the people that I work with say, well, what do we do about this? I say, well, one thing you can do is go talk to Drew Brooks. He has worked in this field for many, many years. I can't remember how long, Drew. You'll tell us how long, right? And he has helped countless congregations put together sustainable and meaningful, impactful addiction awareness ministries. And so I've invited him here today to talk about how a congregation does that. So Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us how this works.
Thank you so much, Pastor Ed. I greatly appreciate your speaking to the why of this. I think that's so important. That's a question that needs to be answered as an individual, as a family, as a congregation, as a community. Why do we want to address this issue? And so what I'll be talking a little bit about is the what, but mainly the how. And I know that Pastor John is going to be kind of speaking to kind of the what as well. It is great to see a number of you come to this webinar. I recognize some names and faces, so it's great to see people from all across the country. Just a little bit about myself. As Pastor Ed talked about, the beauty of what's happened for me is it's married my personal life and my professional life. Personally, I grew up in the church, lived in the church. My dad was the head usher. My mom was the first woman on the council. So whenever the church was open, I was often there. I have done music ministry, youth ministry, small group ministry, caring compassion ministry, and of course, addiction ministry, which we'll be talking about today. So the faith community was huge for me all through my life. Then I also got in recovery, and that was I've been in long-term recovery, and that's been since January of 1980, and I don't that's a few years. And I witnessed exactly what Pastor Ed was talking about, is we weren't talking about this. And I knew, I was a youth at the time, I knew that there were families that were struggling with this, but we just weren't talking about this. And so here I had my faith and my recovery life, and that led me into my professional life. So I worked in treatment at Hazelden for a few years. Then I decided, why do I have to wait till people get broken? So I started working in the prevention side of things and health promotion, again at Hazelden. And then I worked in public health. In public health, I was working with underage drinking and marijuana use. And so I was taking it from the individual to a congregation, to a community, and looking at it in all of those spheres. And when I was working in public health, I communicated with a woman named Trish Merrill through a man named Roger Svensson, and I said, I want to work with the faith community. And she, as I was hiring her to work the faith community here up in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, she hired me to be the area coordinator. So I worked with about 35, 40 congregations doing this type of ministry. So I cannot imagine being in recovery without a foot in my faith community and a foot in my recovery community. So that's kind of my story. All of us have a story. Many of us, if not all of us, have been touched by addiction or mental health issues. So where I want to go with this is what I experienced was that whole idea of stigma. And I just want to very briefly touch on the idea of stigma and shame. Stigma, one of my favorite definitions is it's a mark of disgrace, and which leads to discrimination, prejudice, bias. And some of the congregations that I've been a part of, there was a judgment and condemnation around these issues. And so there was this kind of mark of disgrace. So you didn't talk about it. That was the external influence that does two things. One, it makes us not be honest with ourselves. We don't feel like we can talk about it or even acknowledge it. And the second is then we don't ask for help. And that leads me to the internal influencer of shame. And shame, according to Brene Brown, and I like what she does, she's been researching a number of these topics, including shame, is the bottom line is the person doesn't feel worthy. And they don't feel worthy of getting help. So in response to that, I have really looked at, in working with faith partners, and I've been with faith partners since 1999, so it'll be 24 years and coming up in November, is to be able to do three goals. The first goal is to create a safe place. To create a safe place, and when we're talking recovery-friendly church, you need to have a safe place for people to step into a ministry. The second thing is to have the conversation. And our particular ministry, ours is more, although it dovetails recovery-friendly churches, and that is the result of what we do, is Dr. Dale Ryan from the Fuller Theological Society or Seminary would describe what our ministry is an advocate, the church as advocate. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But so to be able to start talking about these things. So that's the second goal, is to have the conversation based on whatever's coming down the pike. So you're creating a structure, and there's safety and structure. And what the structure for us is a congregational team, is developing capacity to basically do cultural change within the congregation. It's as the original founder of Faith Partners would say, it's like a person from a family where they're experiencing addiction going off to Al-Anon and getting some tools and strategies and coming back to the family system and being able to start to make changes based on their interaction with people from a different point of view, taking care of themselves, having stronger boundaries, self-care and whatnot. So it's these teams that go off and get trained, coming back and affecting the whole system, the congregational system. So one of the things we do at the front end, and then the third one is once you had the conversation, and now it's the opioid epidemic. It used to be methamphetamines. It was crack cocaine. It's teen suicide, domestic violence. There's just a number of topics. But the main thing is to be able to have, as Ed said, process addictions and all that, to have a structure. So whatever comes down the pike, you're able to develop some capacity around it and have the conversation. And then the third goal is to meet people where they're at in their experience and in their understanding of whatever issue you're talking about, mental health, whatever issue you're dealing with. So those are the goals that we have. One of the first things we do in creating that safe place is we do a congregational survey. And one of the things that it has done, and one of the things I should say up front is what we have tried to do is marry faith and science, is to be able to marry the best practices of faith forgiveness and grace and compassion and all that faith community brings, with the best practices of science, like stages of change and the strategic prevention framework of assessing and developing capacity and planning and implementation and evaluating what you do. Because bottom line, what we want to see happen is that these congregational efforts are effective, not just feel good, but are actually effective in doing what they're doing. And the second thing is that they're sustainable. And some of the original teams that I worked with in Minnesota, they're still going on. Pastor Ed's church is one of those, Transfiguration Lutheran, where he served for quite some time. They've been up and running for over 20 years. And part of it is, it's not a program. It's not a 6-week video series. That's not the way recovery works. And that's not the way prevention works either. We do different prevention interventions at different points in a person's life. And we want to look at prevention across the lifespan. So we do a congregational survey. There's a number of things that it looks at. It looks at attitudes towards addiction and recovery. It looks at, does the person perceive the environment as feeling safe? The third is, what is their own personal experience with addiction? And the fourth is, do they perceive that they have some capacity or self-efficacy? Do they feel they can do something for other people? And what we have found in working with congregational teams and congregations is, within 15 to 18 months, we have moved people from 42% that feels like they're ready to do something to 62.5%. So 50% increase in having a supportive environment, a safe environment, feeling like you're capable of doing something, and also having that attitude changed, where it's less of judgment and condemnation, where there is greater understanding and compassion. And that takes time. It takes time as an individual. It takes time as a family. It takes time as a congregation. So this is not just a program, it's a ministry that evolves, and it evolves based on the needs of the congregation. It evolves based on the capacity of the team and the congregation. It evolves based on what are the issues that's going on within the congregational community. And what is the missional focus of the congregation? Is it just social justice? Is it compassion? Is it teaching? Is it evangelism? And so this ministry dovetails nicely with any of those that the congregation sees as a missional focus. And sometimes that's not clearly defined, but this ministry can help clearly define that. So those are the goals. The process of doing that, the first is building congregational support. There will be, it's a dance. There will be people that resist looking at this because it might be too close to home. And there will be people that are receptive to it because maybe they've had an experience where they've come to the end of themselves and they have sought healing and recovery. And they understand it. And they wish the same thing for others in their congregation, in their families, in their community. The next thing is to equip the leadership, both lay and clergy. We do basically a two-prong approach. One is to educate clergy, because they're the gatekeeper. If they don't believe that this is something they want to do, it's not going to happen. And then to engage the lay leaders, and those are often the experts. They're often the experts sitting in the pews. What we've learned through a survey or a study done a number of years ago, So Help Me God by Joseph Califano, is 94% of clergy saw these issues as important. Only 12% have received any education around it. So there's a huge gap, 94%, 12%. But the people sitting in the pews can be the people that can help create a recovery-friendly congregation. Health educators, teachers, counselors, law enforcement officers, variety of things. So the next thing is developing the team and developing the ministry. And it really takes on the shape and the culture and the personality of any congregation. And we've worked with hundreds of congregations, and we have worked with, I think, 24 or 25 different faith traditions: Muslim, Jewish, primarily Christian, Buddhist, Toltec, Unitarian Universalist. we've worked with a variety, and each looks at this differently in some ways. So to develop the congregational, and part of that process is to answer the why. Why are we doing this? What do we want to do? Where are we starting? And where do we want to go? So finding, and what are the destinations that we want to look at? And part of that might be a recovery-friendly church. Part of it might be doing prevention with middle school students. So it really is a variety of things. And then the last is, how do we sustain this? And that should be a question that is answered at the very beginning. Is you start to create infrastructure. So the pastor needs to be on board. The governance of the congregation needs to be on board. They're having a network of congregations, so you're not the only show in town. Connecting to community and collaborating with community efforts, like I did in public health, working with all the different sectors of the community. So having that infrastructure in place. And so just a minute or two left here. The way to drill down this is really what I would call the spheres of advocacy. It creates this ripple effect and really develops the idea of creating a recovery-friendly church. Because first off, you need, as an individual, we need to figure that out. Myself being in recovery, I had to figure that out. How did I feel about that? There were times that I was filled with self-loathing, and I needed people that loved me. I needed people around me that loved me before I began to love myself. And that's where the faith community can play such a huge role of hope and healing. So the first one is self-advocacy, and self-advocacy is being comfortable with your own story and your own skin. And we all need to get to that place. I was working with a woman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and she was part of the whole training, a day-long training. And she goes, "Drew, I've been in Al-Anon for 24 years, but I don't think I can do this ministry." And I go, "Well, why?" And she goes, "Because people don't know me that way." And I thought, oh, I didn't say this out loud to her, but I said, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, your recovery is so small. And really, it's not your recovery anymore. It's God's work through you. So get out of the way. And so that's what we need to experience is to feel comfortable with our own story and our own skin. Then as we express that, and I've done that in a variety of ways, then it is all about people approaching me. And I remember, I've done this in 3 different congregations, one in a Lutheran congregation in St. Louis Park, and one in a non-denominational church in Austin, Texas, and now in a Methodist church in Minneapolis. So 3 different Christian denominations, but I've worked with a variety of faith traditions. So talking about this, especially in Austin, Texas, I would talk about this in a Bible study. I remember saying, we were doing a Bible study, and I said, that sounds like the 3rd step. 3rd step, what's the 3rd step? Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God. Well, where does that come from? Well, the 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other variety of 12-step programs. And they would just kind of back off, and they're going, should we be talking about this? And sure enough, after me outing myself, doing my self-advocacy, I started working in case advocacy. People came up to me, they go, I have a sister who's 42 and she's addicted to cocaine and I don't know what to do. I've done everything I can. I have a 17-year-old son who is experimenting with marijuana. I have a 42-year-old son who's living at home and he wants us to pay for his 4th treatment. This was all within the first 6 months. People would approach me. So I help them navigate the system. So that's case advocacy, then public advocacy. And what you can do in a recovery-friendly church is do education. Move from ignorance to understanding, fear to compassion, and move people in that direction by educating people on mental health first aid or adverse childhood experiences or trauma and trauma-informed care, and just a variety of things so people become more equipped to be able to do what they need to do. The next thing is public education. The last is organizational, or the second to last is organizational. What are some practices that you do in the congregation? Do you have a recovery worship service? Do you talk about this in sermons, in your preaching and teaching? And then the last is legislative. And what we often think about with advocacy is just legislative advocacy, but it starts with the self. And so one of the things that we do in our training series is help people find their own voice. And that is where will lead to recovery-friendly churches, is a congregation that has found its voice. So I'll stop
Thank you,
there.
Drew. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure you all have questions for Drew, and we're going to save some time at the end for those questions. So I told you a little bit about why we should do this. Drew's talked about how to do it. But what does it look like in reality when it hits the church? How does it impact a church? And John Sutherland is the lead pastor at Cross Lutheran Church in Roberts, Wisconsin, and he has worked with the Center of Addiction and Faith. He's worked with Drew, and it has impacted his congregation. So, John, could you tell us a little bit about how what you guys are doing there in Roberts?
Well, certainly, I'd be happy to. First of all, for your context, Cross Lutheran Church is just outside of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're a small congregation, about 500 saints in total, so we're not a large congregation, which shows that, you don't need size to do this ministry. What you do need is willingness. And in some regards, it's also the perfect storm for us as well, because like Ed and Drew, I'm also a person in recovery. I've been clean and sober from drugs and narcotics and alcohol now for 21 years. And I've been very, very public about my recovery, which I think put my name out there already. And so when this congregation was issuing the call, they were very, very excited about the possibility actually of doing some kind of recovery ministry, which I think, for sure was the biggest blessing and boost to our ministry, because we had folks chomping at the bit to have this happen before I arrived. And I think that's fairly unusual for a lot of congregations, but at the same time, in our context of Western Wisconsin, where addiction is rampant, people said, we need to do something. And so I did as what was advised earlier. I contacted Ed, who told me to contact Drew, and we discovered in the process that, to quote Hillary Clinton, it takes a village. And Drew was kind enough to come and train our team in becoming a recovery-friendly congregation and delving into recovery-friendly ministries and recovery ministries. We began with the Blessed Survey, and it was wonderful because it affirmed what the council had thought and what the congregation really, really had said was true, that they desired that we address the issues of recovery and drug abuse and substance abuse in some form. And that's okay, because right now that's the sexy topic. It's going to be really a little bit more difficult when we get into sex addiction, porn addiction, gaming addiction, food addiction, screen addiction, all those things as well. But right now we've been concentrating on drug and alcohol addiction. And I guess it's probably easiest to say where we began. We began with Ed and Drew. Ed came to preach to the congregation, then Drew came to preach to the congregation, and then Drew helped with the team. And of course, with me already being someone in recovery, we had clergy as a vested interest. But we also had a lot of people who volunteered to be on what we now call REC, which is our Recovery and Evangelism Committee, which did mean that we had to change the constitution of our congregation. But anyway, so we replaced the Evangelism Committee with Recovery and Evangelism Committee. And everyone on the first committee was directly impacted. Either they had, spouses or children who were currently using and addicted, or they were in recovery themselves. We're on our second team now, and guess what? Everyone on that team has the same background. Either they're in an Al-Anon type situation, or they're in a recovery group type of situation, and they all have been impacted firsthand by the ravages of the disease. And so we have in each other a support group. We also have a vested interest, but we said, where do we begin? And we didn't really know where to begin or even how to begin until Drew came and inspired us in many and various ways. And we decided that we can't do it all at once. What we wanted to do is we wanted to start small and do things in an excellent manner. And we learned a couple of things, that the recovery community does not need Cross Lutheran, but rather it's the other way around. Cross Lutheran needed our friends from the recovery community to come and infuse us with energy and support and insight. And it's funny because our congregation has grown a lot in the last couple of years that we've undertaken this ministry, which is unusual in a time of pandemic anyway, and unusual in the post-Christian era as well. But at the same time, the vast majority of people who joined us because of our recovery ministry. Now, I'm not quite sure how to explain what we do, but our first thing was really to establish a recovery-friendly worship every week. So every Wednesday evening, we have recovery-friendly worship. And that's slowly begun to meld itself into our Sundays as well, but in a very, very small way. Our worship committee now has decided that the element for communion at all services will be alcohol-free wine. We used to always have grape juice as an option. And then on Wednesday evening, grape juice was what was in the chalices. But now, we're going to actually spend the money and use alcohol-free wine for everyone and get rid of that differentiation. We also publicly state who we are and that everyone is truly welcome. And that's part of the DNA of this congregation, which I think makes our recovery ministry work, where really people at all levels of the continuum of use feel like they have a home here and are welcome. We don't reject anyone who enters our doors, and I think people know that and appreciate that. Our ministries have also led to more outside ministries coming in. No church has an Al-Anon, no church has an AA, but we've opened our doors, and so now, 2 years ago, we didn't have Al-Anon. Now we have Al-Anon. 2 years ago, we had one AA meeting. Now we have two AA meetings, and one happens after our Wednesday evening worship site or worship service. And then also now we'll be incorporating some of our Wednesday into Sunday as well, because there's been a desire voiced by the Sunday morning congregation that, hey, well, we need to be speaking about this more as well. One of the other things that we also realize is that we have to work as an entire congregation. And so our recovery and evangelism committee now has paired up with our children, youth, and family ministry, and we're doing joint ventures together, because the survey did say that people are really, really concerned about preventing the young people from abuse and use. And so we thought, okay, well, then we have to really include that aspect of ministry and work with them. And so our first really test on that will be coming up in September, when we're going to be having an event on screen addiction. And we're not saying screen addiction for the young people, we're saying screen addiction for the whole family, because as we all know, everyone in this world is addicted to screen time now. And so hopefully that will be our venture out into the other things, because like I said, right now, as long as we talk about drugs and alcohol, that's quote unquote sexy. But if we talk about the things that hit closer to home, I expect we'll get some of the pushback that Drew has warned us about as well. If a congregation wants to undergo the ministry, I would recommend a couple of things. First of all, have Drew come in. He does an incredible job of teaching teams how to do ministry, and also start small, because, I sent Ed an email after one of the conferences, how the Center of Addiction and Faith has affected this congregation. I based it off the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, These Things Will Happen. And they all seem small, but altogether it's like we've come a long way in the last 2 years. Like this one small example is just this card we put out that we share with everyone who wants it in the congregation. We've also distributed to the local police department for people who are having crisis. They can call us. One of the things too, I would really, really encourage is folks to attend the Center of Addiction and Faith Conference. Our congregation sent our team. And I'll be finding out tonight at our meeting how many people from this congregation will be going to the next conference. But that builds momentum and excitement that a pastor or clergy person or rabbi on their own cannot bring to a congregation. You really, really need to have a team with you to generate that excitement about what's going on and bringing it back. But at the same time, what we did as well is at the last conference, we got hooked up with Mental Health Connect. And we've hung posters up with the little tabs for if you need help. I've been amazed at how many of those tabs have been already pulled off and used, which is a resource we didn't have before. And so just having the resources available for the saints that you serve is an incredible gift. We did set up also a resource center of all kinds of recovery material and books out there as well that people can use. Our plans for next year are to team up with a Synod Bible camp, which is we're associated with, and do a family recovery camp next summer. And as we do these things, the word keeps on getting out and out and out, but also I think what it has done has really not only changed the DNA of the congregation, it's also changing our community, because I think everyone to a T in our recovery team will say that our focus is really to give the community a gift and another way of being. One of the things we're doing is we're hosting a Sober Oktoberfest on the 23rd of September. And it started off very small, not really an Oktoberfest at our congregation. We just had our praise band and a couple other bands do music with a pig roast. The first year was really good. Last year's up in front sucked. Music was horrible, but don't tell anyone I said that. And then this year, we're actually brought in the Mike Schneider polka band. It's a very, very good polka band. We're having it outside the congregational grounds, and it's going to be a bigger to-do. But anyway, it's going to be not only a fundraiser for the Center of Addiction and Faith, but it's also going to be a community event in Wisconsin that's alcohol-free, and showing people that, yeah, you can actually have fun without alcohol. What else do we do? I mean, we do recovery-friendly worship. We steer people towards treatment. That's happened a lot. We've had a lot of conversations where people come in and said, I need help. I don't know where to go. And I say, well, we know where to go. And careful what happens when you do it, because one of our team members now is rather absent because he went back to school to become a drug and alcohol counselor. And so it's just kind of like, okay, this is going to go on, but it's really, really important that a congregation actually adopt it into the Constitution or whatever your denomination or faith's bylaws are. Is that way this ministry is going to go on past Pastor John being here. However, I do think probably, when I retire and they're ready for, their next leader to come in, that person probably is going to have to, I don't know, I'd be surprised if they call someone that's not in recovery themselves. I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and go through what we've gone through, that hell and back. But at the same time, if you're going to start the game, you're going to have people with credibility behind it. And I think part of our ability to do this at Cross Lutheran is that everyone on the team, myself included, have skin in the game. And so I don't know if the ministry would have worked if we had people who were compassionate and interested rather than having direct experience. I think, the fact that, We are a small congregation with a team of 12 people, where everyone knows each other. I think in some ways that probably adds some weight to our credibility, just proportional wise, that, oh, okay, because everyone knows who everyone is in this town and in this congregation. And that's been a benefit because the stigma aspect has been erased. And I would encourage actually to begin with giving people freedom to out themselves and say, hey, me too, me too, me too. And that frees up a lot of things, because I've had a lot of incredible conversation, not just only across, but in other ministry settings, where my openness about my addiction and recovery has led to a lot of sacred conversations and more ministry. And so, just don't be afraid of the stigma anymore and out yourselves.
Nice. I agree, John. It probably helps a lot that you're in recovery. That makes a big difference. But I think Drew could probably point to a lot of places where the pastor knows very little about it, and the team is what really drives the ministry. And that I think in every congregation there's a handful of people who are secretly in recovery, and this gives them the opportunity to come out and start sharing their story and having an impact on the congregation. We'd like to open it up now. Thank you, John, for all that. That was inspirational. I got excited listening to you. You guys are doing amazing stuff. I want to open it up with the last few minutes that we have here for questions, comments. I'm not sure what to do with this many people. There's 56 of us. So if you use your little button at the bottom it's the reactions button. If you want to put a hand up, if you want to ask a question or make a comment. And I can't. Jaron Summers, would you like to ask, Jaron? You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so actually we met. I was a seminarian at Trinity Lutheran Seminary, and I'm finishing. So thank you again for hosting this. Something I'm thinking as I'm about to enter parish ministry is, where do you begin? Like in my congregation where I'm a vicar right now, people are not open about addiction whatsoever. And I haven't gone through recovery myself. So where do you begin to get this conversation rolling? I talk about addiction in sermons and such, but it never really goes further than that. So where the congregation is now going to host an Al-Anon group sometime during the week, each week, but I'm worried about that becoming separate from the congregation and just letting them rent our space. So where do we get the conversation rolling and things like that? I don't really know where to begin.
I'll jump in. I'm sure Ed, John, you will have some responses as well. It sounds like you already have begun. I think it's always brave for a clergy to preach from the pulpit around addiction issues. So that's huge. Just the fact that you're opening your doors, being hospitable to Al-Anon or to a 12-step meeting, or things like Good Chemistry or Alcoholics Victorious or Celebrate Recovery or whatever. There's just a number of pathways and a number of different recovery programs. I would recommend that you reach out to somebody who is in recovery, and there becomes that educational process. And when you start talking with a person in recovery, they might get excited and go, would you open the doors? I would like to do more with this. And they can be your mentor, they can be whatever, but they also can be the driver to be able to start doing more of the ministry. We did not do an Al-Anon meeting until our team decided to do an Al-Anon meeting. And this was in Red Wing, Minnesota. And it started out with just 2 people sitting in the room for 3 months and just reading literature to each other. And by the end of the year, they grew out of the first room and they were into a second room. So it's being patient. It's providing the opportunities. Like you said, you don't want to just be renting space. So have some hospitality. One of the things that we did is we did an open AA meeting. And we had people from our team that were in recovery have an open AA meeting where people didn't have to have a qualifier to attend. So what would normally have been about 20, 25 people in a 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, there was 70 people. And I went to it, and I remember as people were leaving the meeting, they asked questions after. As they were leaving the meeting, some of the people were going, boy, that's a lot like Christianity. And so it was just amazing, because it kind of demythologized, I'm not losing the word, mysticize it or whatever, it's we develop these things. What's this higher power thing? That's got to be a scary thing. It could be anything. It could be a tree. It could be a doorknob. And I do not know many people with long-term recovery whose higher power remains a doorknob or a tree or whatever. What it does what they do recognize is, here I'm in a lockup ward, and I'm looking out at this tree, which is growing and it's alive and whatnot. So their higher power isn't a tree because it becomes their God. It's that it's living and it's growing, and that's something that's missing in their life right now. So to be able to latch on something, and if it can do it in the faith community, that's huge. But anyway, I probably said too much.
No, I agree with Drew. If you can find those people in your congregation who are in recovery, they're out there. You can put an announcement in the bulletin to say, are you a person in long-term or in recovery? I'd love to meet with you and talk about some of the things we can do together.
Yeah, I would echo that exactly. And then also, if you can swing it, get people to go with you to the conference. Participate in any kind of continuing ed you can as a group. And so it's just not you as a lone wolf saying, hey, we should do this. But if we have support within the congregation, then the change will happen. But what Drew and Ed said, put the word out, say, hey, I need you people, and come talk to me, and take it from there.
People in recovery have a mission to carry the message to those who still suffer. And so if you give them the opportunity. Stacy has a hand up. Stacy.
Are you able to hear me yet?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So first of all, to John Sutherland, hello from Pastor Angie Cutney from Joy Lutheran Church in Centria. She was excited to see that you were on this. I don't think she was able to make it today. But I love your Oktoberfest, and I put in the chat that we support recovery in Polk County, just north of you, is planning to do an OK Sober Fest. So Oktoberfest. So I'm going to be talking to you about that, and maybe we can combine forces. But what I really wanted to know from you was, what does your recovery-friendly worship service look like on Wednesday nights?
Oh, great question. It doesn't look like a typical Lutheran worship service. And it's sort of a beast that got out of hand. And I say that in a manner of love, because it drives me nuts some ways. But we have a really, really incredible band, which I'm very, very grateful for. And they're all playing bars, and so their strength is in Christian music, thankfully, because a lot of Christian music I hate, but I said it there too as well. But there's a lot of spiritual music out there that's considered secular, so they use a lot of those songs. Sometimes it goes with the gospel proclamations, sometimes not, but the Spirit works as the Spirit will do. But it's very, very basic service. We try to abbreviate and keep it as friendly as possible, because we want to have a time of fellowship before people go into the AA meeting, which we have an open AA meeting following that worship. So basically, it's an opening prayer, a song, reading, message, a confession, forgiveness that leads into communion, and then another song. And about 35 minutes, we are out. We don't have the Kyrie or the hymn of praise or the Grand Thanksgiving or the Sanctus and all those things that we have on Sunday morning. It's very, very much abbreviated liturgy. But at the same time, it's also, I think, a little bit more user-friendly, just because, especially for those who aren't comfortable coming into a church. And it's interesting because we have people who come to the meeting who won't go to church yet. They'll wait until the service is over and come into the building and go to the room for the meeting. But for those who brave to come in, we wanted to make it as friendly and welcoming and as familiar as possible. And so a lot of what we do on Sunday mornings really isn't all that familiar to people who are on the outside. So we basically done a very, very simple format, really, of music and dialogue and preaching, introduction. And then what happens too is periodically we have people from the congregation or from meetings speak the sermon as well and share their story. And so sometimes it's like a public or an open AA meeting, and other times if I'm, and I'm usually preaching, it's a little less than that, but we always have a recovery meditation in that service as well. And that's a work in progress, to be quite honest. Everything keeps evolving as it has to. We can't be where we were 2 years ago. And I think a lot of times churches get stuck where they're at, no matter what they're doing. And our goal is to remain fluid and being able to adapt the service as needed. I will give a shout out to our Presbyterian brothers and sisters. They do have a wonderful recovery awareness service out there. I guess the Presbyterian Church wanted them to use it once a year in their congregations. There's some great stuff in there. Go online as well, because there are other recovery services there. But when I've tried them, they weren't authentic to Cross. You got to really kind of find out where you are and what works here. And I have to say our band By Faith really has been instrumental, and a lot of them have been involved in the team as well. And so, but basically I know I went on and on and ever. It's a very easy worship service, very, very basic. Keep it short and simple. I'll put it that way.
Did you say your band members were instrumental?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
You got the pun.
So is the Wednesday night service live streamed? Can people check it out?
It is live streamed.
So,
and I've already rolled my eyes at tonight's music.
There's also other resources, much like John is saying. The Episcopalian has some wonderful recovery worship resources. There are also from the Jewish tradition, the Methodist Church, with liturgy and whatnot. So if you're interested, I can potentially shoot some of those things to you as well, or you just look them up in their judicatories or their national offices.
So the Center of Addiction and Faith has a free smartphone app that is chock full of resources for spiritual leaders, tons of resources, but there's some worship materials in there. There is one recovery worship liturgy that you can adapt to your setting. It has prayers and readings and liturgies that are that use recovery language in a really beautiful, creative way. And so you can steal that and use it however you want. And there's a couple sermons on there if you're looking for sermon ideas that you can listen to and get some inspiration from them. But all our webinars are on there, podcasts are on there, help finder. There's a help finder if you're looking for help in your community, and it'll dial into your location. It'll dial into what the issue is, whether it's addiction or a need for counseling. It'll find what's in your community to help individuals. So it's called the app is called Center of Addiction and Faith, and it's in your app store, either Apple or Android. Just look for Center of Addiction and Faith and download it. It's free. You know what? We're out of time. I'm gonna do some closing remarks, and then we'll just hang on here for anyone else that wants to stay and talk and has more questions. But next month is Recovery Awareness Month, and our webinar guest is Dawn Eden Goldstein. She's written a book on Father Ed Dowling. Father Ed was the spiritual mentor for Bill W. And her book is the Christopher Award-winning biography of Father Ed, the story of Bill W.'s spiritual sponsor. She will share the message and life of this remarkable priest who played a key role in spreading the good news of recovery. So that should be a really great podcast or webinar for next month. Our conference is October 5 through 7. Katie put a link into the conference website. I hope you can get there, and I especially hope you can bring a team with you to inspire and transform your congregation. There is, prior to that conference, there's a pre-conference for clergy or seminarians or anyone licensed in the ministry to come and spend a couple days just with clergy in recovery. And so if you're a clergy in recovery, that is a free will offering for for that conference. I'm sorry, pre-conference gathering. And so prior to the conference, October 3rd through the 5th is available for you. And then I told you about our smartphone app. Go to your app store, look for Center of Addiction and Faith. And then finally, we do this ministry on faith, and we don't have any big funders, and we need support. So if you have resources, we could use $10,000-$20,000. So whatever you can give toward that, it would be great. But I appreciate you all being here today. If you need to go, you can go. If you have more questions, we'll hang on here for a few more minutes and see what people want to talk about. Any other questions, comments? Janine Lindquist. You have to unmute yourself. Janine, are you there?
Fine. Yes,
There you are. I can hear you now.
Hello. I just wanted to
Hi.
thank you guys for doing this. I work in prevention, so I'm not part of a clergy community, but just wanted to kind of share a little bit in the work that I've done in prevention. I come from a family that struggled generationally with alcoholism. So I always say from a young child, I was kind of a prevention person from heart, trying to pull people in the right direction. And God has really put on my heart just recently when COVID hit, they asked me in the work that I was doing, would you try making some online videos that could encourage people during this time? Because I couldn't go into the schools and do the work I was doing. And I started praying about it, and God would just wake me up in the middle of the night downloading these scripts. They're called mental health moments, and they're very biblical truths in a public forum. So I put the link in the chat. If you go to the Zeph Center Prevention YouTube channel, ZEPF, you'll see them. They've received over 1 million views, which to God be the glory, truly, because and people have said, this sounds like something from the Bible, and it is. So there's messages on, you know, understanding forgiveness and forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. And just recently, I've had the opportunity, the door is open to create an online mental health resource that I've called myjourneyofwellness.com. And I'm trying to do live testimonials, videos from people in the fields, you know, experts in the fields, as well as people sharing resources. Again, this is going to be a public forum, but it's very biblical, spiritual based, kind of in that hidden, sneaky God kind of way. It's been really exciting to see. I've interviewed people that are doing some wonderful work in the communities, from someone in our community doing a fatherless program for fatherless young men. He was a fatherless youth. He's a believer himself, and created this program to help other fatherless youth try to learn how to tie a tie and do things that dads would do with them, change a tire. And so I'm excited to see how God propels his work forward through the videos that I've been able to kind of do with him. So I just wanted to toss that out there. If anyone knows of any connections that, you know, I could interview them. It's just a quick Zoom connection that I turn into a video. But I'm just really excited to see how God uses this to heal people that really need healing. A lot of people that fall through the cracks. So mental health first aid trainings are great, but they're lengthy. So it's just exciting. And I just had the opportunity within my church to share this as like a testimony. And then I'm also doing like an 8-week class. They have classes that they have set up on the journey of wellness. So I'm just kind of excited to see where it goes. And I also want to toss out that idea to any of you that maybe if there's some classes within your church, this could be kind of a way to bring these topics in that people do want to talk about. So,
nice.
Thanks,
Thanks, Janine. That's fantastic. And I think if it's okay with you, we'll put that link on our phone app that has we have one icon that leads people to useful links. So we'd like to link to yours, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ryan has his hand up. Ryan, you know, you'll need to unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you again for putting this out there. My church is, I think, just taking baby steps and looking at how we can become more of a friendly church for folks going through recovery. an idea came to mind too that I thought would be worth sharing. I'm a Lutheran pastor, but I'm also a dance teacher, and I have friends who cultivate community dance spaces as an alternative, as a sober alternative activity on like Friday nights or on Saturday nights. And anyway, that just thought it'd be worthy to put that in people's minds too, to think of other things outside of traditional worship spaces. But my good friend Trisha, who does this in a Methodist church in Pittsburgh, and it's incredible how many people show up, obviously, that are interested in movement and dance and self-expression, and as a spiritual practice too. That's definitely a portion of it. But I think also they do make it very explicit that the intention is to have a space of self-discovery and healing, and I think there's great potential in that too, offering a different sort of spiritual practice as a doorway into recovery too.
If I could say something just really quick, Ryan, that's such excellent stuff. When I was in Austin, Texas, I was part of the recovery-oriented system of care, and it was about developing social supports. And there were things like dance and yoga, and it would go out of RCOs, recovery community organizations. And I was on the ROSC, the Austin ROSC, because I wanted the faith community to be a part of the solution. And it sounds like you're already doing collaborative work where it can be not just housed in a church or a synagogue or a temple, but it could be a collaborative effort with other community efforts. And so I love that. That's just a great idea.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to dance sober.
I can't.
Same state learning, they call it. Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, you've got a question. Tom Schwoller.
Hi, Tom.
Wow, Drew Brooks, a blast from the past. We used to hang out together in Minnesota a billion years ago. I am a Lutheran pastor also, but my family, my in-laws side of my family, started a treatment facility almost 2 years ago for adolescent girls, and it's mental health and substance use is kind of the requirements to be there. It's residential, it's a ranch, and I do spiritual care there. And this is pretty new to me because I've not been a part of the addiction community, but I'm a pastor, and the owner, my sister-in-law, wanted me to be part of it, and so invited me in to do that. And so I was going to ask for if anybody knew of any resources. And Jeanine, what you just shared, I think is something exactly what I'm looking for. Just hopeful messages that I can, they do the 12 steps stuff on a different day. My role is to really just kind of help them explore higher power, help them. What does that look like for you? But I deal with a lot of the religious trauma that comes as part of it. And I know this is a little off the subject of today, but I think it relates because I'm kind of trying. It's sort of like I'm trying to bring church to them in a sense. I'm trying to bring a spiritual experience to them, but because we are a public facility and not a nonprofit, we have to keep it sort of generic spirituality. So this is helpful, but I just wonder if there's any other resources you could point me to for that kind of thing. I see Otto waving his hand.
Yeah. Otto, why don't you go, Otto? Need you to unmute.
Thanks. Yeah, Tom, call me.
Okay.
I was a treatment chaplain for 40 years, many of them in a public facility, and we got away with lots of stuff there. And I can tell you about how to do that and not violate norms.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, if you could put your email or in the chat, or that would be great. And I'll email you, get set up a call.
And Yeah, but the other thing I want to point out is 5 years ago, Drew Brooks came in for about a year, did a variety of trainings with us here in Lincoln. And the result is we have about 20 teams in Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska now. And we've had substantial success marrying recovery ministry with prevention and education. Right now, we have 20 churches that are hosting QPR suicide prevention trainings that are provided by the Prevention Center and so on. We've also begun to hook into peer support staff at 2 different agencies. They tell us they have people who want to get involved with churches, but they're very shy about doing it. And so we think we can connect them with our faith partners churches. So I just wanted to add those couple of points, and then I'll put a phone number in the chat, Tom. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Otto.
If I could just do a quick response there as well. Tom, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you as well. As I had said at the very beginning, and I was doing a 30,000-foot flyover, is there are like 8 models of recovery. One of them is recovery-friendly congregations. Another one is kind of a treatment, what is it called? What did he call it? Treatment-related strategies. So it's connecting congregations with organizations such as yours. I know it's a public agency, but there can be things where they provide meals, or they do something where they just do fellowship and have conversation and create relationships. If there isn't that barrier, there are often times where congregations will partner with residential recovery residences or halfway houses or whatever, where they will do Bible studies for them in-house, or they'll have transportation to their congregations to be a part of their worship and whatnot. So to create those partnerships, I think is huge as well. So.
Love it. This is great.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so helpful.
So any other questions, comments? I see no more hands showing. Oh, Margaret. Margaret, you got your hand up. Could unmute.
Oh, I just wanted to thank all the presenters. It was really exciting to meet Ed yesterday on the phone. Our deacon joined us for a moment. She's the one that sent me the literature. I'm in a Fairfax County right outside Washington, D.C., in a very, very dense populated area, and very interested in all the Protestant churches on oxygen. I've been part of the recovery movement for the past 5 years when my son became seriously addicted, and he's doing really well. I really had to immerse in so many different programs to understand this. And then as a licensed counselor, begin to take it on my caseload with the fentanyl epidemic. But one thing I wanted to share, just on a pastor point of view, is that my pastor has done some initiatives with our neighboring churches. So there's a Methodist church and a Presbyterian church and an Episcopalian church. That's us. The 3 of those pastors are they're all women. They're all getting together and they get to know each other. And they've decided to do a combined youth group because we all just had a few youth. So they're going to do this combined youth group. And all of us host 12-step meetings. Probably most people can't quote the 12 steps, don't know about the program. But I think there's a real spirit of collaboration here. I don't think one congregation that's in the regular Protestant, communities is going to have enough room to pull this together. I think it's a hot topic. And for those of us in recovery or with loved ones in recovery, we are ready. I can't even breathe listening to this conversation because my whole life is church and my whole life right now is recovery, and I'm so excited. I need 10 more hours in every day to do this. But we already have the empty room in the tower. I already know where there's money. All these ideas. Yes, we're going to have the dance. Yes, all of it. Yes, but I know that I need other people. So I took some notes, and I'm full-heartedly understanding that we have to prepare the congregation, and we have to get to know each other, especially those of us that are in recovery or in Recovery Ally. Once we can get together, go to the conference, join this group, there's nothing that can stop us. And this is where Jesus wants us. Why our churches are empty, these beautiful buildings, these beautiful pastors, these beautiful traditions, you know, and I look at these large Christian churches with the band and the one pastor, and I'm going, what's going on here? What do people need? And they don't understand, say, traditional worship. It's such a beautiful tool. And AA 12-step programs rightly needs to stay independent. That's why they're the beautiful program that they are. So there's so much opportunity here, and I'm really grateful to all the speakers and all this effort and all this years of experience. And I hope, you know, I'm not just hot air and I keep showing up. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, I'm remembering my first call as a pastor. I was fresh out of seminary and I got an interview in rural Nebraska. And I had put in my paperwork that I was a member of AA and member of the Fellowship Recovery Lutheran Clergy. And when I went in for the interview, the chair of the committee pulled me aside before going in, and he pointed to those words on my paperwork and said, "What do we do about this?" And I, like it was something shameful. And I said, "Well, let me just ask me to talk about myself." So I went into the meeting. He said, "Pastor, tell us about yourself." So I told my first step story, basically, you know, how I ended up in treatment and got into recovery. And then when I got done, he said, "You know, we didn't introduce everybody at the table." So one by one, they began to go around the table, say their names, and talk about something that they're struggling with in their life, and really opening up. And we got done, and somebody said, "What just happened here?" It was a little 12-step meeting. But that was an eye-opener for me, because I realized that people are dying to talk about their hurts. And that's the gift recovering people have to give to the church. Is speaking the language of vulnerability and authenticity. It gives everybody else permission to open up, and the church is dying for this. And for some reason, it struggles with it. But if we can get recovering people to start sharing their stories, which are sacred stories of redemption, then other people get inspired.
Amen.
Yeah, that's all I can say is amen as well.
Yeah.
If you can shut me up, then you've done a good job.
It's a miracle. All right, everybody. What a great webinar. What a great discussion. I really feel like I always love this discussion. It feels like I'm in a sacred place. So thank you for that holiness that I feel.
Thank you.
And go in peace, serve the Lord.
Amen.
You got it.
Amen. Thank you to our John and Drew. Thank you for your work and for being here today. This has
You're
been
welcome.
really good.
Thank you, Ed, for
Blessings.
all that you do.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank you, Drew, for all you do as well. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
John.